You say, hey, there's a problem, you call a man, the Democrats can't even tell you what a man is.
So when you hear Walz brag about how much of a man he is, what does that tell you?
I think there might be a little bit of a cope there, you could say. There's a little bit, he has to remind us how often, how masculine he is, trying to not even be able to load a shotgun or...
We were getting scary close to people justifying totalitarian measures.
I think we need to push back on this.
Tim Walz in the campaign trail was literally saying free speech doesn't include hate speech and misinformation.
There's no guarantee to free speech on misinformation or hate speech, and especially around our democracy.
Hey man, you, because everything that we called misinformation just a few years ago, it's on the front page of the New York Times now.
Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk did not just call out Tim Walz. They ripped through his talking points like a tornado through a paper house. It was not a debate. It was a surgical takedown powered by facts, wit, and a complete disregard for political fluff. Walz came in with bumper sticker slogans, but Rogan and Kirk brought hammers of logic. By the time they were done, all that remained was silence and the sound of collapsing narratives.
Say that you have one rule for Facebook and you have a different rule for Twitter. There has to be a responsibility that is placed on these social media sites to understand their power.
The New York Times just printed a thing. It turns out we were lied to.
They are directly speaking to millions and millions of people without any level of oversight or regulation. And that has to stop.
Yeah, you lied to us.
The most masculine thing that someone can do in America today is stand up for women that are not able to stand up for themselves. Right? So while Tim Walz is going on Gavin Newsom's podcast, attacking me, by the way, saying that I'm a bad guy, well, I'm sorry, Governor Walz. One thing that we don't have in common is, unlike you in Minnesota, I, every single day, am actually fighting for female privacy in locker rooms, and that women's sports will not have men in them. Real men stand up for women, and they're not able to stand up.
Joe Rogan and Charlie Kirk are not known for subtlety when it comes to exposing political nonsense. And when they both take aim at Minnesota Governor Tim Walz, it is like watching two precision mechanics tear down a malfunctioning machine in front of a live audience. One comes in with the hammer of common sense and experience, the other with the chisel of sharp facts and relentless logic. Together, they turn Walz's political track record into a cautionary tale in real time.
Did you say you could fight any Trump supporter?
Yeah, he says he kicked their ass, and they're scared of him because he can fix a truck. Because they're threatened by his masculinity. I know how to fix a truck. So he said, like, do you? I bet you don't.
The lady doth protest too much.
I bet you don't.
I fear.
I bet if I bring a broken truck to you and a bag of tools, you're
Joe Rogan approaches it like a man who has seen a few too many smoke and mirror acts in his life. He is not impressed by appearances or polished speeches. He cares about results, about consequences, and about reality over illusion. And with Tim Walz, the illusion is exactly the problem. Rogan unpacks Walz's governing style like he is reviewing a bizarre conspiracy theory that somehow managed to get voted into office.
There's a video of Tim Walz doing the exact same thing. Right. Exact same thing, and
Yes.
he said, of course, it's a Nazi salute. He said that.
Right.
We spent 3 days debating, having them trying to debate that President Musk gave a Nazi salute. Of course he did. But that is a distraction.
This is how crazy things have gotten. Like, it's coordinated.
He sees a leader obsessed with optics, glued to the idea of perception, yet completely detached from how his policies actually play out in the lives of real people. Joe starts by laughing at the absurdity of Walz's pandemic performance. Rogan, who has spent countless hours talking to doctors, scientists, and people from all walks of life, contrasts that with Walz, who treated the pandemic like a chance to audition for the role of emergency manager in a political drama series.
Have you ever seen that video?
No.
This is what people love about Donald Trump. The fact that he would say this.
But unfortunately, Governor Walz isn't here himself, but don't worry, he'll say that he was. He's going to say it. I used to think the Democrats were crazy for saying that men have, period, but then I met Tim Walz.
Minnesota became a place where gyms were shut down, but big box stores stayed wide open. Rogan tears into that logic with his trademark curiosity. How exactly does a virus avoid the aisles of retail chains but attack with full fury in barbershops and mom-and-pop diners? It gets even better when Joe drills into the governor's bizarre fixation with control. Rogan mocks the way Walz clung to emergency powers like a toddler who found the remote. There was no flexibility, no nuance, just a blunt for common sense. Joe compares it to managing a city with the judgment of a bunker-bound weatherman calling hurricanes from his basement. The more absurd it got, the more Walz doubled down. And the more Joe grins as he highlights every boneheaded decree with the enthusiasm of a man watching a bad sci-fi movie unravel. But Joe is not just a comic commentator. He digs deep, he hits the streets, metaphorically, and compares Walz's fantasy leadership to the real suffering on the ground. The businesses that closed and never reopened.
He was 100% right with Tim Walz.
I know I'm doing something right when the Fox News crowd is all bitching at me like crazy, like I'm loving it.
That guy was almost the vice president of the United States.
Elon Musk was crying last week. Tim is being mean to me, basically, like, yeah.
I'm sure you've seen that thing where it shows Obama saying, I need a vice president.
The family split apart by chaos and confusion, the health directives that contradicted themselves weekly. Joe lays it out like a puzzle, except all the pieces are from different boxes, and Walz insists it still looks like a beautiful picture. And then, Charlie Kirk walks in with his sleeves rolled up and a stack of receipts. Where Joe uses street-level wisdom and humor, Charlie brings the sharpness of political combat. He is less about the laughs and more about the takedown. Charlie steps up like a prosecutor, laying out a case against a defendant who has already confessed through sheer incompetence. Charlie opens fire on Walz's economic policies, or rather the lack of them. Minnesota, under Walz, became a test site for how quickly you can scare investment out of a state. Charlie paints the picture of a governor who acts like businesses are the problem, not the lifeblood of a functioning economy. While other states were reopening and rebuilding, Walz was issuing press statements about equity and climate justice while the small business community was desperately trying to keep the lights on. Charlie finds this hilarious and horrifying at the same time.
That Tim Walz cocksucker, if that guy got into power, like if Kamala died and Tim Walz, Tampon Tim, was our fucking president, you know how crazy this country would be? That weirdo who puts tampons in the boys' room, and what about our joy? Like he's a complete pathological liar, like a complete liar. Lied about being in Tiananmen Square, lied about being a fucking
He calls it leadership by press release, where the only thing growing is government spending and public confusion. He then goes straight for Walz's handling of crime, which Charlie treats like a dark comedy that never ends. Under Walz, Minnesota cities started to feel like they were being managed by someone who learned law enforcement policy from internet memes. Crime went up, morale in police departments tanked, and the streets became laboratories for progressive experiments gone very wrong. And through it all, Walz gave speeches about unity while acting like law enforcement was an optional feature in a modern state. Charlie pulls no punches when describing how Walz responded to the George Floyd riots. Rather than lead, Walz hesitated. Rather than stand up, he stepped back. Charlie illustrates the moment with the dry disdain of someone watching a man refuse to use the fire extinguisher in his hand because he is still checking the instruction manual. Walz's decision-making during that crisis, Charlie argues, was not just weak, it was dangerous. He calls it the leadership style of a substitute teacher who showed up with a guitar and a dream instead of a plan.
When they decided that J.D. Vance was weird. Remember that one?
And then there's weirds everywhere.
Weird. Oh, you don't want a weird guy. Meanwhile, you have Tim Walz, your VP. You don't think that guy's weird? He's weird in every way. The way he walks, the way he waves his hands.
Yeah, he reminds me of the clown emoji.
He's a bizarre guy.
He's a strange dude.
I just don't understand why they made that choice.
Yeah, it gives the creep.
I just don't understand why they made that choice. There's a lot of other people that are qualified. I don't know why. I read that Kamala Harris made that decision.
Then he digs into education. Charlie brings up the disastrous performance of Minnesota schools under Walz. With standardized scores dropping and classroom ideology rising, it became less about academics and more about activism. Charlie mocks how Walz's administration responded to the drop in reading and math scores by increasing the number of diversity officers and training modules. Instead of helping kids read, they taught them how to journal about their privilege. Charlie frames it perfectly. Under Walz, school became a place to learn everything except the basics. The only thing multiplying was the bureaucracy. Joe Rogan jumps back into the roast by comparing Tim Walz's idea of leadership to the plot of a low-budget survival film where the main character keeps ignoring the obvious exit signs. Walz is the guy, Joe says, who would spend 10 minutes writing an email about safety protocol instead of helping someone who just fell down a flight of stairs. He is always focused on the message, not the mission. Rogan brings in the cultural aspect too. He talks about how politicians like Walz are so obsessed with pleasing the right people on social media that they forget who they actually work for.
They bring in her, and they bring in this other guy who's radical from Minnesota. That's the vice president, who he believes a lot of wild things. And one of them is transgender surgery for people who are under 13. Another one is abortion up until 9 months.
Ooh.
Yeah. He changed the Minnesota state flag to make it look like the Somali flag. That stuff scares the
And Walz seems to be managing a state like he is trying to trend on a platform instead of solving real problems. Joe makes it clear that people like Walz are not interested in real conversations or real data. They just want to be liked by the people who already agree with them. Charlie Kirk wraps up with one final slap. He says Walz is the perfect example of what happens when a governor tries to run a state like a graduate seminar. All theory, no practice. All talk, no traction. Minnesota is not a TED Talk, Charlie says. It is a real place with real people, and Walz treated it like a sandbox for elite ideas that fall apart the moment they touch the ground. In the end, Joe and Charlie do not just criticize Tim Walz, they demolish him. One with punchlines and comparisons so sharp you forget it is political analysis. The other with data, breakdowns, and surgical attacks that leave no wiggle room. Together, they expose a man who talks like a reformer, but governs like a guy who won a raffle to manage a state for a week. What makes the roast so entertaining is not just that it is funny, it is that every joke, every observation, every jab comes with undeniable truth.
Podcast with Newsom, why don't you go throw the pigskin with Walz? What do you say?
I think it's a great idea. I'll fly it up to Minneapolis. We'll see what it's all about. Governor Walz, you're Mr. Coach. You're the one that can motivate.
Walz built a career on slogans, smiles, and media passivity. But under the lights of Joe Rogan's scrutiny and the hammer of Charlie Kirk's logic, that image collapses. And when it collapses, there is no need for shouting or special effects. Just two guys with microphones, common sense, and no patience for politicians who confuse emotional optics for actual outcomes. They do not just roast Walz, they turn his entire political blueprint into a museum of bad ideas. And the tour is free, hilarious, and brutally honest. Charlie Kirk leans in again, not finished, not even close. He shifts focus to Walz's bizarre obsession with creating a perfect society through government micromanagement. According to Charlie, Tim Walz governs like a man who just read a utopia novel and thought it was a policy manual. Everything becomes a social experiment. Everything is a test case for how many committees you can build before someone notices nothing is actually getting done. Charlie points out how Walz's approach to leadership is rooted in the belief that government knows better than everyone else. Better than parents, better than business owners, better than law enforcement.
I think it would be very similar to Barack Obama throwing a baseball. I don't think it would be a sight that would be easy on the eyes. That's right, I could throw quite a tight spiral. Hey, Governor Walz, let's go have a game of catch. We'll see how you do.
Better than reality itself. This, Charlie says, is where Walz truly shines in failure. Because once a politician believes they are the smartest person in every room, they stop listening. And when they stop listening, they start losing the plot. Joe Rogan finds the perfect spot to jump in again, this time turning his attention to Walz's astonishing ability to pretend like all his missteps are actually part of a master plan. Joe compares it to watching a magician pull a rabbit out of a hat and then try to convince the crowd that it was supposed to be a porcupine. Walz's speeches are filled with optimistic phrases that mean nothing. His press conferences sound like someone reading motivational posters aloud while a city burns in the background. Joe also points out how Walz always seems to respond after the damage is done. But he is not proactive, he is reactive. But somehow, every time something collapses under his watch, he steps up to a podium and acts like he just discovered the problem with everyone else. Joe describes it like watching a guy break a window, then give a speech about how we all need to do better with glass safety. It is not just tone deaf, it is exhausting.
Just weird and how avoidable it was.
100% avoidable, but pathological liars, people that are habitual liars, they just lie all the time about everything.
Charlie takes aim at Walz's refusal to own anything. The man has a degree in blame deflection. Every time something goes wrong, it is someone else's fault. The federal government, local officials, climate change, Mercury in retrograde, anyone but him. Charlie jokes that if Walz tripped over his own shoelaces, he would blame the shoe industry and call for a statewide review of walking practices. Accountability is just a word he throws into sentences when the cameras are rolling. Rogan follows up by hammering the disconnect between Walz and the people he governs. There is no empathy, no awareness, no understanding of what working-class Minnesotans actually face. It is all filtered through advisors, headlines, and trending topics. Joe compares it to trying to run a farm based on Yelp reviews. Everything looks clean from the outside, but the inside is chaos and cows are missing. Charlie closes with a brutal summary.
Cognitive decline problems at his age, but at her age, she's just dumb.
Yeah, I think I was saying that I need a vice president dumber than me.
Kamala Harris may be the dumbest person ever elected vice president in American history.
Kamala saying I need a vice president dumber than me. It's Walz. Men have tampons.
We have a lot of accomplishment. We haven't taken adequate credit for it, frankly. We got to do a better job of getting the word out about what we have accomplished and who did it.
You got to lose because we got to break this cycle.
Walz is the governor of press conferences, not people. He is more interested in shaping narratives than shaping results. His greatest skill is turning political failure into soft-spoken disappointment, as if whispering bad news makes it less disastrous. But no amount of gentle phrasing can hide the damage. Minnesota, once a proud and functional state, has become a backdrop for Walz's ongoing seminar on what not to do. And just like that, Rogan and Kirk leave behind not just a political roast, but a full autopsy. The cause of death is clear. Too much control, too little awareness, and a governor who confused power